Hello and welcome to this week's Hippie Hyena. So this week we've got some vox pops outside a university where a right-wing head case is harassing university students about gender. Let's let the guy in the video introduce it himself, shall we?
We're here at Sussex University. Today we made a special effort to come down to what is called one of the wokiest universities that we've got. We're here to see just what's happened with our institutions. We're going to be interviewing students to find out just how woke they are, the specific topics to do with gender and with transgender. As you can see, I'm in my Christmas jumper. We're ready to rock and roll. Let's find out just how mental they are.
So that's kind of the setup. What the aim of this is to try and find the most outlandish people that they can in order to kind of promote the idea that there's some sort of problem and rile up their viewers into a state of frenzy, which hopefully they can leverage towards extracting money from them or votes.
So would you have said in this instance, feelings trump facts? Would you have, if someone was to say to you, what about biology, and they play that card, would you have said, no, what matters is what someone's feeling rather than actual fact, like biological science?
So what you have here is known as an editing trick. This has been misleadingly edited in order to present a certain false impression in the viewer. So what you can tell is that this is a conversation which has been going on before what we're seeing here. When we're sort of thrust into the middle of it, it's already been happening beforehand. And I am almost 100% certain that what was happening just before this edit was that the student was explaining the difference between gender and sex, in the sense that sex is generally considered to be something that is a physical manifestation of, say, chromosomes or physical body parts and so on, and gender is effectively your expression, so it's self-expression. It's how you look, how you appear, in terms of whether you're sort of, whether you're wearing a dress or trousers, whether you've got long hair, like me, or you've got short hair, or whatever it is that you're doing to express what your gender is, and also what you want to be thought of and called by other people, what gender you want to be referred to, your pronouns and stuff. So you could argue, although it's a little bit difficult to argue this, and considering what the science says, but that sex is sort of biological and therefore fact-based, whereas gender is entirely sociological and therefore is based around feelings, because that is what it is based on. But this part has clearly been edited out in order to try and create a kind of fake gotcha moment with the left admitting that it's all about feelings over facts. Well, in this instance, because we're talking about feelings, it is. That's like saying, oh, you prefer the Marvel universe to the DC universe. Well, is this about facts or feelings? Well, of course it's about feelings, because you just have a preference for one over the other.
Yeah, I think to some degree, because human emotions are incredibly complex, and the idea of identity is incredibly complex.
Yeah.
And I think takes precedent over just facts on a paper, I think. And,
sure.
Debating scientific facts.
And there they have it, the gotcha that they were looking for. But it's not really the gotcha that they think it is, because the problem that they have on the right is that they always go on about how, facts are more important than feelings. But on this subject, almost more than any other, even though it's kind of universal, but on this subject more than any other, they don't have either on their side, really. I mean, it's just their feelings against the facts. The scientific consensus is against them on this one. They are incorrect about it. Factually incorrect.
Are there more than two genders? Let's start off with that.
Yeah.
There are? There are more than two genders?
Yes, of course.
Of course. Love it. The conviction. I love it. So, help me out here. What are they? Can we talk about them? Can we name them?
This is another sort of rhetorical trick to try and present something that isn't absurd as absurd. It's like saying, are there more than two shades of either black or white? Is it just black or white, or are there greys? And you're like, well, there are greys. And they're like, well, name them then. Well, you can't, because there's an infinite number of possible combinations of black and white. It's a gradient. There's all sorts of things that you could discover, and that could keep being discovered. There's literally no end. end. In fact, to be honest, there's so many that basically gender doesn't really mean much. That's the truth. But like the idea that if you say, well, I can't, go on, name all of the colours, shades of grey. Well, I can't. In that case, you're crazy. There's only black and white. Only black and white exist. Well, there are like other colours too, like red, green, purple. Well, name all of them. Name every single possible colour that you could possibly ever have. Every shade. Come on. Well, that just doesn't make any sense. See? There's only black or white.
Well, there's obviously the binary male and female, if you want that, and then there's some people that are non-binary, and then...
So we know about the two, binary.
Yeah, and then non-binary, there's some people might be gender fluid or
there's agender.
Gender fluid, agender. What's agender?
It's where you're outside of gender, so you don't really like identify with any gender, and it's just some days you feel like you.
Sorry, agender. Oh, I see. Like, okay.
Now this is a thing which constantly boggles the mind, and it shouldn't, because I should be used to it by now. But this guy clearly doesn't know anything about the subject that he is reporting on at all. He's stultifyingly ill-informed. Just doesn't know anything about it. I mean, he hasn't even heard of agender. Like, surely they could find somebody who actually knows something. Although that might be difficult at the Turning Points UK office, I imagine.
So what does that look like then? Oh, wow. So in practical application in life, just in general, what does that look like?
Anything. It can be whatever you want. Like, I don't think gender needs to have a specific look. If you want to identify a certain way, then identify a certain way, as long as, like, I'm going to be respectful of you no matter how you look.
Yeah, perfectly reasonable response here from these students. Perfectly reasonable. Like, just don't be a dick to people, you know? Don't treat people like trash because they're different from you. That's basically all it is. Just treat people with respect, just with basic human dignity. That's basically all they're saying, you know? That's it. But what I think is amazing is this edit, which is about to come up. So just after she finishes saying this, like, you know, pretty reasonable thing about just treating people with respect, let's see the edit that they jump to next, shall we?
If you want to identify a certain way, then identify a certain way, as long as, like, I'm going to be respectful of you no matter how you look.
But would you support kids transitioning?
the editor's like, oh, this is starting to sound a bit too like we're the bad guys, isn't it? It's making us like they're just saying we need to treat people with respect, and we don't like doing that. So, oh shit. What have we got? Let's scan through the rest of the interview. Oh yeah, there was that time he asked the question, what do you think about kids transitioning? As if like to raise the scary shibboleth, the scary mythology of boys getting their dinkles cut off when they're sort of like 5 years old or something. Even though this goes without saying, that isn't happening. That's not happening. It's a myth. It's fake. It's fake news. It's made up. But the reality that they were being presented with was getting a little bit dicey, so they decided to jump with both feet into conspiratorial gibberish.
To experiment with fashion, we get to experiment with sexuality. Why can't we experiment with what gender we are?
So fashion, I've heard this before, it's quite interesting. So fashion and other such social norms and values isn't the same as the gender. There's a higher step up, I would have said. Would you have said that? Would you agree it's the same?
No, it's not a higher step up. That's literally the whole point. Like, who gives a shit? If you want to wear a funny hat, you want to wear a dress, you want to call yourself she, he, or whatever, who cares? Like, let people do what they want, man. It's like so weird, so like overly interested in other people's lives in this really nosy, obnoxious way. And this is why fundamentally the right wing is so deeply unpopular and continues to become more and more unpopular because of the world that they're offering people, which is a world where you can't just have fun and do what you want. You gotta do what, like, old dead white men thought you should do, which nobody wants. Like, it's totally weird. And it's not really as if any of these people who are sort of arguing for this being implemented are really following that either. I mean, for a start, a lot of them are closeted homosexuals or trans chasers. There was that thing with Alex Jones where he left his tab open. I mean, how many of these kind of scandals in inverted commas do we have to live through before we realise that nobody wants to live like they're advocating for, not even them. And I'm sure, people listening to this, just like me, would rather a world where people can just be who they want and be free to express whatever they feel inside, as long as it's not hurting anyone in any way they choose. That sounds like a nice place to live, rather than one where you're sort of following bizarre, arbitrary rules for literally no reason, and strangers are getting into your affairs about how you want to run your life and your family. That sounds absolutely f***ing awful.
Like what drink I choose to drink in a pub isn't the same as whether I should become a different gender.
But at the same time, it should be just accepted to that level. It's like, oh, they've decided that they want to be male today. Well, okay, that's their choice.
Pretty based. Some cool kids there from this Sussex University, which is actually the university my sister went to, interestingly enough. But what can we learn from this? What can we learn from this whole debacle? Well, first off, we can learn that it's possible to ask wrong questions, which is something that is generally sort of not talked about. Often the focus is on correct or incorrect answers, but sometimes the questions can be phrased such that they are wrong in themselves, so it makes answering them quite difficult. And second of all, we can learn from this, which is kind of, I think, the exact opposite thing that Turning Points UK, who put together this video, was wanting us to learn from this. But it's kind of like, if these kids that they're interviewing here represent the future of attitudes in the UK, then the future's quite bright, really. It looks pretty good. Looks good to me. So carry on, you crazy kids, and make the future better for all of us. A future where people can just be who they want to be without dickheads like this telling them off for it. Look after yourselves and each other. Hippie hyena out. Goodbye.